Ms. Rivers, you ready? All right, we are back on the record in State versus Lawson, and we have, it's not a question, it's a statement, but card number 4 from the jury. It reads, "We are still having issues deciding." And it says there are 12 people who are set in their decision on one charge and not willing to change their minds. I was hesitant only because I tend not to share numbers with you all, but 12 is actually a number I can share. It's like 0. It's not a divide. My thought is this. I'd like to bring the foreperson out and ask the foreperson a few questions along the lines of, are people having a meaningful back and forth, or do you have a juror who's in the corner with her arms crossed saying, I'm not going to engage? Because if it's the former and they've reached a verdict on one count, and then there are 12 people who've made up their minds, but it is, I'm not going to ask the divide, it is not a unanimous decision that they've got. Some people are one way and some are the other. But they have been thoughtfully engaging, and they are at what this foreperson describes. He or she will use their own terminology, but kind of a impasse, an immovable point. I think we are where we've gotten on this case. But we can discuss what decision I make based on the answers we get from that foreperson. If both sides are comfortable, bring the foreperson out to talk about that. Ms. Baez, are you all right with that?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm all right with that.
Okay. Are you all right with that, Ms. Rios?
Yes, sir.
All right. Can we bring the foreperson in? They're just right outside?
Right outside.
Okay. It's all right. You all can be seated. You can be seated. Ms. Beza stepped right outside. She was just getting a few folks. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing good.
Good. I got to ask you a few questions
Okay.
About the state of affairs in the jury room. But I'd ask you to refrain when you are answering from saying how people have decided, by which I don't mean it was a careful thought process, but we've decided guilty, not guilty. Don't want to hear that. And also, if there is a division amongst you that is not 12-0, don't please share those numbers, that 8 people are going one way and 4 the other way. Don't want to hear that either. So first question is, my understanding is that your group has reached a unanimous decision as to one count.
That is correct.
Okay. And it's the other count about which there is continued, indecision may be the wrong word, but there's a lack of unanimity.
Correct. We've reached an impasse.
An impasse. I like that word for this situation. Is the impasse, in your opinion, a product of good faith exchanges and backs and forth and people just disagree? Or do you perceive that one or more jurors are refusing to deliberate, not participating in the conversation?
No, it's the former, not the latter. We've had very good discussions and everyone's being very civil with each other.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and we've all, we've got it set up. We're all stating our, what we want to talk about. One person talking to John, I'm calling. And so I feel like we've reached a point where some of the people that are on the other side, and what could change your mind? Is there anything that would take away the reason, beyond a reasonable doubt? And there's nothing right now.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that sounds to me as if you are saying you don't believe that another half hour or another 3 hours is going to change much, because you all have gone around and around, not once or twice, but multiple times, sharing respectfully the conflicting views and concluding that reasonable people disagree, and we've got 12 reasonable people. And as to that other count, it's just not one where there's unanimity. Is that a fair summary of where you
I
are?
think that's fair. I feel like if we stayed in there for another 2 or 3 hours, we would come back and be in this exact same position we're in right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Appreciate you sharing that. Ms. Beza, do you have any questions for our foreperson?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Rios? All right. Head on back. Thank you. Ms. Beza, do you have a suggestion as to what we do next?
I think the Allen charge might be beneficial, next. Although the juror did say if he's in there another 2 hours, it will be the same result. However, I've seen where jurors were at impasses in other trials and the judge read the Allen charge and they, came to a verdict either way. So I think the Allen charge may be beneficial if they're willing to deliberate, say, till right after lunch. I know we have a lunch break soon.
Okay. Ms. Rios, what is your thought about how we process what we all heard from the foreperson?
I think we call it, I'm not sure what I said about the Allen chart is gonna make a difference if they're that much seem to be divided. Yeah.
I couldn't quite hear her whispers, but maybe you'll translate them.
We can't force people to continue deliberating if it's not.
I mean, I can, but I don't want to because it's not productive. It becomes coercive and I wouldn't ever want, and I don't think Ms. Beza is saying anything to that effect. And no one's saying you were. So you don't need to stand up and say you're insulted by what you heard. But it is, I could make them stay there. But I find this was a very thoughtful foreperson. And I think this process has been blessed by a jury that is engaged and not tribal and saying, well, you're viewing it one way and I don't appreciate your worldview. Reasonable minds, and I think we've got 12 of them, they differ, and on one of the counts, not on the other. So you do not object, Ms. Rios, if I call this to a close, and ultimately it would be declaring a mistrial as to the count where there's not unanimity, and then I'd be accepting the verdict as to whichever count it is where there is unanimity. You don't object to that approach? Okay. You'd prefer an Allen charge?
I prefer.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to accept the verdict that they have reached and process that with you all, and we will go from there. So have they filled out the verdict form? Okay, why don't you check with them? I'd ask you all to stay right here.
You just sign your name with it.
Okay, all right.
Don't see finish up. Let them out.
Yes, please.
All right, jurors.
Right, thank you. You all can be seated. Not yet. Okay, first, was Mr. Dent on time? All right,
He was number 6 today.
okay.
No donuts though.
Oh, all right, but the important part happened. My understanding is that you all have reached a verdict as to one of the counts and you are at an impasse as to the other count. Is that correct, foreperson?
That's correct.
All right, if you would please stand. As to the count for which you reached a verdict, was it a unanimous verdict?
It was a unanimous verdict.
And have you completed the verdict form as to that count and signed and dated it?
Yes, I have.
All right, will you please read the verdict as to the one count where you were unanimous?
For count 1 of aggravated assault, we, the jury, unanimously find the defendant not guilty.
And then count 2, which would be the family violence battery, there's no verdict included there. That's where there was an impasse.
There was an impasse for that.
Okay, all right. Deputy Gordon, if you get that verdict form to Ms. Beza and to Ms. Rios, please. Ms. Beza, do you have any objection to the form of the verdict?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Rios?
No, you're right.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Beza, before I excuse this jury after their several days of service?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Rios?
No, you're right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you on behalf of Fulton County, on behalf of both the state and Mr. Lawson and his legal team. You gave us 3 days plus a morning, so 3.5 days of your life. You had other things you needed to do, wanted to do, but there was a dispute that needed members of the community to resolve it. And that's what you were called upon to do. And you did that as to count 1. And so we can only repay you minimally by your daily stipend that you get, but know that you played a very important role in moving forward a case that had been stuck for a while. And I appreciate your time. I'm going to have you all go back to the jury room in just a second. You'll be joined by your 2 alternates. We'll return your electronic devices. I've got letters that are proof of service in case you need them for whomever. And I just want to thank you more personally back in the jury room. The lawyers may want to interact with you afterwards, and you're free to do that. That format would simply be you'd come back to the jury box if you want to, and you'll tell me back there. This is a private decision you get to make. But if you do, it's sometimes helpful for the lawyers to get feedback on what worked, what didn't. Lawyers, you were great. Facts were bad. Facts were great. Lawyers, you were bad. Whatever your feedback is for them, it's a way to learn how next time they might do something differently. So I encourage you to do that if that fits in your schedule, but it's not required. Okay? If you will go with Deputy Gordon to the jury room, I'll be there in a second. All right, everyone take a seat. I will get the verdict form entered, and I will also get an order declaring a mistrial as count 2. We can talk another time about what we're doing with count 2. We don't need to sort that out today. I want to thank the lawyers, and please pass this on to Ms. Feely as well on both sides, and Ms. Crutchfield on the state side, for their hard work on this case. I also think it is important to note that this verdict doesn't mean that nothing happened to Ms. McCrary. It doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that the jurors found that there was reasonable doubt about some aspect of the alleged strangulation. So this isn't a victory for anyone, but the jury has spoken, and they have found that the state didn't meet its burden. I trust, Mr. Lawson, that you will continue living your life apart from Ms. McCrary, and let her move forward in her direction. You still have a charge pending, so be mindful of that, because that needs to be resolved. However, it's going to be resolved, and the state needs time to regroup and think about what it wants to do, and you'll want to talk with Ms. Rios as well. And that's all I've got. You all, if you want to interact with the jury, stick around. I will let you know if they're going to, so you won't be stuck here waiting till 4, if any of the jurors agree to come out and chat with you all. Anything from the state before we adjourn?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Rios?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, everyone.